really you can promote employment through the private sector. One, by giving tax subsidy or tax credits to private sector. If I have a company and you say to let's say Total or Shell or Akintola Williams or whatever, please take accounting graduates, please take engineers. The government will subsidize you for at least for 1 year that you are or 2 years, train them, put them in your employment and what have you, and we will, whatever cost it will give you, government will subsidize you through tax credits and subsidies.
I think there was something similar in the last government for women.
We should
or
do
something
that.
Like that.
Because this is almost similar or akin to the NYC program. These are not NYC people, but it's more or less like a grooming system whereby you train some of these people, but you're getting your funds from the government while you do all of that for these individuals, right?
Yeah, well, the NYC is still being funded completely by the government. They send a copper to your organization, but it is purely discretionary whether you want to give them something else. But most organizations give them something, something rudimentary, very small. And some really pay them well. But the problem is that it has to be organized, this type of thing. That is after graduation. Those ones are after graduation and they are looking for a job. You can have a job scheme whereby you can say, okay, you can work in the hospital, either in the laundry department or in the, as an auxiliary nurse or whatever it is. You train them and you give them some money for that. Or you can appeal to an accounting firm or a legal firm to take some lawyers, and some accountants, train them, pay. And then you can say that, look, you want to train them so that they can become good accountants, they can become good lawyers, 2 years, 3 years, internship or whatever it is. But we can subsidize the salary you are paying them, or you can take off through tax credits. That's one way of doing, of promoting employment. Now, there are so many areas that's why the budget is good, because I just wonder if you are doing that you are going to promote financial training and what have you.
Yeah.
What happens to SMED? Are we repeating the same? Are we duplicating resources? That's one. Now the government says it's having efficiency unit to bring about some reductions in cost and what have you. We already have organizations like Bureau of Public Service Reform. Why can't they do that? Why do create another efficiency unit? Now, the government spoke about their zero-based budgeting. It's good. But to me, it's, what we have now is a horrid zero-based budgeting. And I still wonder whether the zero-based budgeting and MTEF, because zero-based budgeting approves incrementalism completely. That is the incremental budgeting. Whereas the MTEF is based on incrementalism, really. The baseline is the estimates and what have you. So I'm not too sure how we can marry the two. Now, the government needs to work more on that zero-based budget. One can give them, chance to say that it's too early, but perhaps maybe in the new year they can now work more. One of the things this zero-based budget says, what does it mean? It says the allocation of funds according to program efficiency and necessity. Are you with me? That's what zero-based budgeting is all about. It doesn't look at past prior year's budget. It's not interested in history.
Is it a good or bad thing?
It can be very good, because it can reduce inflated budget. It can reduce sandbagging, just putting all sorts of projects that will never be.
What if I had a 3-year project that started funding from maybe 2 budgets before the third?
Yeah, it doesn't. What zero-based budgeting means is that you now start to re-examine whether those budgets can, whether we really need them. For example, you can set up criteria like, is this program in the public interest? Is it fiscally avoidable? Can it not be transferred to a lower level of government? So does the federal government, do they have to do it? I used to have a brother who works with Lagos State, and he told me that, there's this mega city project, Lagos Ogun. And he told me that, look, the federal government has a mega city, whatever, and they were pumping money there, but they've never interfaced with them, with the Lagos State and Ogun State. They are just on their own. So things like that. So what I'm saying is that when you introduce zero-based budgeting, you need to really sit down and do program analysis.
So is this where states will also tailor their budgets with respect to what the federal government does with their own
Yeah,
budget?
the federal government wants to do that. In fact, that even brings me back to this CCT. It can be centrally designed, but to do it well, it has to be decentralized in its implementation, because it's the states and the local government that can implement it, even though it's centrally funded. So that's why I was surprised when they said they're already compiling lists. You know, it's there I was surprised. How can you compile this? Do you know where the poor are? You know, we don't know. You have not told us. We have not told us about the eligibility criteria. You have not even publicized it to say, go and collect forms or so and so, and, you know, these are the so. And you said you are compiling lists.
You know, in all of this, so would you have loved to see us move away from this yearly budget presentation to having a budget that can care for us maybe once in every 2 years or for a 4-year term?
Yeah, you can do that. You know, I mean, that's what the MTF is supposed to do. If you do a medium-term sector strategy, 3-year. So you will see that each year will just be a rollover of the previous years with a minor amendments. But you need time to sit down and do it well. Look, if you tell the government MDAs to prepare a budget now, per second, they will give you figures, because without much thought. And that's why most of the budgets don't work. But if you have time, perhaps from January now till maybe March, they can sit down and do a thorough analysis and then do a 3-year projection. And then so we can have a budget. Even with their zero-based budgeting, it can work. You can do it for 2 years. That's not which says that it has to be done yearly. You can do a zero-based budget for 2 years. And in any case, most of the capital expenditures, you can't finish them in a year. Building a school, most of them are not completed in a year. So why do you have
rolled over?
Yeah, why do you have 1 year of capital? So most capital expenditures are always 2, 3, 4 years, even 10 years. Some of them. I mean, let us assume that we want to have power plant now, because some of them are not things you just take off the shelf. It will take some years, 3 years, 4 years. So it has to be budgeted that way.
Okay, well, I'm just also looking at the area of employment, because it talks about employing 500,000 teachers that they will recruit, and then we see power, works and housing taking the larger chunk. But this then mean, if we're going to keep employing people, and naturally recurrent expenditure will go up, there's no danger in there, is there?
Well, I mean, there's no danger in expanding employment, because if you employ more people, of course, the ability of the economy to produce resources and what have you, well, it's because the people you employ will have a multiplier effect. They have to consume something, they'll pay tax and what have you.
So it's like a cycle.
It's a cycle, so it has a multiplier effect. So once you give somebody a job, you give him money, you know, you equip him with disposable income, which he can go to the market and he buys. You know, whatever he buys, the producer of those things he buys will now be able to, if there are more people that buys, they will be able to produce more and things like that.
But Prof, how much of consideration should we give to states and their budgets? Because federal budget alone cannot get this country out of the woods.
Yes, that's good, but you have to really, you can do that, because the federal government doesn't really, the way the constitution is made, it doesn't really have power on the state budget.
Yeah.
Unless you can do it through moral suasion. You have a policy that, you know, a buy-in policy. That's why the National Economic Council becomes important. You know, you can influence the states by telling them why they should go along with the federal government on certain policies and what have you. Another way is to actually encourage them through fiscal grants. Now we want to promote this so and so. If you tag on with us, we can give you a grant, conditional grants, which you will account for and things like that. You can encourage the states to key in on government policies, but you cannot force them. Because the peculiarities of the states are such that the economic situation and social situation in each state differs.
Yeah.
So the state has to reflect. I mean, the state budget has to reflect those peculiarities of their situation.
All right. And finally, is the passage of the budget in time going to have any significant impact?
Well, at least we are in December now, so it can take off from January, isn't it?
That's what they're working on.
It can, so which is good. It's better than we have to wait in the middle of the year before it is passed. And of course, there are, the budget also must spell out certain quantitative targets, which we will be able to hold the government responsible for. For example, inflation is one. The government says we are going to manage inflation. Fine, which is good. But it didn't tell us by what percentage are you going to reduce inflation. I think they ran out of that. They just ran away from, so that people don't say, but when you are doing your budget, the inflation was 20-something%, but it's still 20-something%. So we need to hold our government responsible now to say, tell us by how much you want to reduce inflation. And and another big area in the budget is how do you finance this deficit? Are you with me? And it has posed a challenge for the debt management office. All right, because we now have to come out with very innovative.
They talked about some key areas, the FIRS and several other agencies where they'll
those are compliance organizations. They just, the government has made the law. You must comply with the revenue law. Now that you even mentioned that, all right, the government kept on saying we are going to make sure that some MDAs comply with the Fiscal Responsibility Act, but it's empty. The whole thing is empty. Okay, take a private sector, it makes money, all right, and he reports what he makes, in the sense that nobody controls the cost. What we get at the end of the day is the surplus, is the profit. So we kept on saying operating surpluses. How do we know the operating surpluses of NPA or maritime organization, in the master, unless we introduce financial control system? The beginning of the year, we expect 20% rate of return on the budget of NPA. We expect 15% on the budget of cost, this and that. That's when you can know the operating surpluses. People, even in the private sector and the government sector, they play a lot of financial games, a financial numbers game, manipulating the cost and what have you. So that's why you see that the expenses are very high and the revenues are low, because they maximize their cost, because we are going to give this excess to the government anyway. Why don't we spend it as much as we can? So there are a lot of, those are the loose areas. Tighten the loose areas, give us quantitative targets for the inflation, so that we know how much you want to reduce inflation. Because the government, at one time said we are going to set up efficiency unit, is going to reduce personnel costs by so and so percent, is going to reduce so and so by so and so percent. If they can do that, why can't they do that for inflation? To say we want to reduce inflation by so much percent. All
right. I'm sure in the days ahead, we'll also bring that back to them and ask specific questions of them about that particular. But thank you very much indeed, Professor Olaseni Bello, who is of technical assistance for the implementation of the EU support to federal governance reform program. He's also team leader and a public institutions expert. Thank you for coming on this morning, Prof.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we will be back and turn our attention to something a little different from this one. Don't go away.